how important is transparency? How important are ethics when it comes to the media? And will we, the electorate, hold the media accountable or simply accept this collusion?
You can hold the media accountable, but what does that mean? Does that mean that the blogosphere becomes the new media now, as they have in many cases, and now really tries to dig for truth because the mainstream media doesn't do that? It's really hard. You say, I use that term all the time, let's hold them accountable, and then I sit back and say, all right, how does the average person actually make that happen? You know what I mean?
Right. So if we take as rote that this is the new reality, or certainly the new reality of this election, how does that, do you think, impact the election on election day?
Well, I think everyone reading any news outlet of any kind should always, and most people now do, this has changed now because it's easy, because you can look up what happened at that Romney speech today. You can see 5 different, you just Google it, you see 5 different versions of the same speech. You get a sense very quickly of who's coming at this from what angle. So as long as people have that in mind, I've said it before here, I'm really of the mind, there's no such thing as a truly objective journalist. I think the journalists who pretend that there is such a thing have an agenda or are just not self-effacing enough to deal with reality, because people come to things with their opinions.
But now they're simply being spokespeople. There's a difference, because now they are turning off any filter, even a biased one.
Changing a quote is inherently unethical, it would seem to me.
Completely.
To pretend that something that was said is something else is a fabrication, actually. So we're going well beyond that. But just in terms of how people should look at this, I think that this is just another example that buyer beware. Everything you read, where is it coming from? What's their agenda? Because there's always an agenda.
But can you really get to know the candidates then, though? Who are the real people? How do you make that happen?
The New York Times is going to tell you some off-the-cuff thing about Barack Obama that's going to make his campaign put it in an unflattering light? It would never happen. Even if it was front-page news, they would never do it. And everybody at home should know that. It would absolutely not happen.
Can I guess what you're going to say? Sure. Sorry, before you, can I guess what you're going to say?
Sure, please.
Not going to matter. It's not going to matter to the voter. The voter has already made up his or her mind, and they're not going.
It's really about total public debt.
This inside story, this inside baseball story about how the media actually works behind closed. It's not going to matter.
Close but no cigar.
Oh.
I indict the voter, I indict the viewer, I indict the consumer, but for a different reason. They're getting what they ask for. I don't worry so much, although it exists, about the bias of the media. I worry about the media's willingness to comply with the viewer's demands. What I see is it's become very, very, very easy for a politician to manipulate the media, manipulate them through distraction. Let's make sure this quote is tweaked just right. Let's change the narrative this week to talk about Bain. Let's change the narrative the next week to talk about outsourcing. And the media, like an obedient dog that is fixated on the latest distraction, will quickly shift each week to whatever it is the politicians want you to be talking about. And why would they do that? Why would they do that? Because the things you should be talking about, the policy, the philosophy, the ideology, doesn't rate. People don't respond, viewers don't demand, they don't watch. So what do we need? We need the latest story of the dog strapped.
So we get the media we deserve,
Well, and to make sure that I want to be very clear, this is happening on both sides. I'd like to point out that there was an insinuation that Drudge accepted a story from the Romney campaign about vetting Condoleezza Rice to change a story, you know, a conversation we were having about Bain.
Well, Essie, I have a far less charitable analysis of why the media is doing this. I think we've been seeing for many years the transformation of the political media into something a lot more like the Hollywood media. That the fact that they're allowing the campaigns to vet their quotes, that's what, like, tabloids do. That's what Glossy, that's what Us Weekly does. It runs it past. This is one step away
they trade for access.
But we also see journalists who love, you know, the fact that they're on television. We now have the White House Correspondents' Dinner with the red carpet where they can dress up and have their photos taken. The New York Times, by the way, doesn't allow their reporters to go to the Correspondents' Dinner. And finally, we have these absurd Veep steak stories that, to me, are no different than a starlet putting out the news that, oh, I'm up for a part, and then everybody writes about it, even though it's completely phony. It's just a way to sell newspapers.
Actually, it's more like who's dating who.
But when you look at the political journalists now seem to think of themselves more as celebrities than shoe leather reporters trying to, you know, get down in the mud and dig and maybe not become famous for it. I think a lot of them are treating this more like, as I say, the Hollywood press than the political press.
Will makes a good point. Is that because that's what our appetite is for? Do we have an appetite for sensationalism and for everything has to have entertainment value, and people no longer have an appetite to just sit and hear about issues and policy, and the media is in fact catering to Arnie's? That's a very interesting angle that you point out.
In any newspaper in the country, what's going to get the headline? The guy who says something for the campaign that he's not supposed to, that's controversial, maybe paints somebody else senior in the campaign in a really negative way or insinuates some kind of a dirty trick, or the guy who says, I had this really long policy discussion with the senior advisor to the Romney campaign on agricultural subsidies. Boom, you're on the what page?
Who's going to get the book deal out of that?
But they can still dig for truth. If their motivation was to dig for truth, I think they could still dig for truth and make it entertaining and put a sensationalist spin on that. I think we have two problems. We have this is becoming, all Hollywood, all nonsense, and then you have campaigns and television networks working together to create a Hollywood character of a candidate that doesn't exist.
And I have to say,